If you say, for what, I will not answer. We're live. Good evening. Thank you all for coming out. I'm Rick Tate, chairman of the Pickens County Republican Party, and we're here tonight to give Representative Josh Putnam a chance to speak to you and answer your questions on his run for the Secretary of State. And we appreciate you coming and joining us and giving us the opportunity. I'd like to ask Jeff. Is Jeff out of the, oh, there you are. Would you start us off with a prayer, please?
Let's pray. Father, we do thank you for this time we have tonight. We thank you for this privilege of free speech and the blessings of this great nation that you've afforded us. I pray you'd help us to act and responsibly, and may our speech be pleasing to you and edifying to one another as we discuss the various issues. I pray for Josh tonight as he shares his heart and passion for this office, that you would guide him not only tonight but in his endeavors. And then, Lord, I think as Rick has shared his heart tonight about the illness of his parents, and I do pray for their health and well-being, and would ask that, Lord, if it be your will, you would show mercy and grant healing and ease their suffering in these difficult and trying times. And yet I'm aware that for each, for everyone who's here, I'm sure they have their own burdens and concerns that weigh heavy upon them. And so, Lord, I'm grateful that you know those needs, and I pray that you would work even in their behalf, even though we don't know those needs. So bless our time together tonight. May it be pleasing to you. In Christ's name, amen.
Thank you. I would only add to that prayer. I'm not going to preach a sermon by any means, and I'm not qualified to do it anyway. There's a lot of rancor and arguing and going back and forth in politics, and sometimes it's easy to get caught up in the passion. And sometimes we get caught up in thinking we're so right that we don't want to listen to anybody else's opinion. But I always, when I get like that, I say, help me, Mabel. Because Mabel was my grandmother. And she raised me on, or raised us, taught us all. Her whole religious philosophy was based on one passage in the Bible. John 13:34-35. She said, Christ gave us one commandment. Love one another, even as I have loved you. You will be known as my disciples by the way you treat one another. So in your prayers, include me, that I can try to live up to my grandmother's expectations, although I do fall and stumble at times. Prayers would be appreciated along those lines too. And as you pray for me, I'll pray for you. Now, Pledge of Allegiance. If you join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I notice, in the pledge it says republic. It doesn't say democracy. I think some people miss that every once in a while. We have a few folks here tonight we'd like to recognize before we start. David Cox, candidate for District 5 to represent the Easley area in Columbia. Naturally, we've got Josh. And Rex, our senator. And as the night goes by, if you got a question about anything going on with Pickens County or anything going on in Columbia, Rex is always willing to talk to you or answer your questions. One last thing before I turn it over to Josh. Anytime you come to a meeting, you expect somebody to pass the hat, right, or pass the plate, or hit you in the wallet. So anything you'd be willing to contribute to help us do this and to advertise these events and continue. I was just told Josh and talked to Rex, we're going to try to figure out a way to make sure we open an office during the primaries for all the Republican candidates to have a distribution point for their campaign materials. So you can tell everybody, go in Pickens County, you can go there and get my campaign sign, my bumper sticker, whatever the candidates want to hand out. So anything you can do, any money you can donate to us, we would appreciate. John is our treasurer. He takes cash, he takes checks, and he's got a card reader. He'll take your card even. So with that, Representative Josh Putnam, the father of a beautiful family, as a matter of fact.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that. I think this is okay. I want to thank you all for allowing me to be here tonight, to be able to kind of tell you the reason why I'm running for Secretary of State. I know some of y'all know who I am, you know my background, but just to kind of recap how I got to this point. So when I was in college at 21, I decided to run for the State House because I didn't believe that my values as a conservative Republican were being heard in the halls, in the House, and in the Senate of our state capitol. So I ran when I was 21. We ran for 1 month. We ended up losing that election by only 130 votes. It opened up into a special election less than a year after that. I ran for the seat again, won it overwhelmingly within that special election. And I've been serving in the House for now 7 years. I serve in Powdersville, mostly Anderson County. When I first ran, it was all Anderson County. Then after redistricting, we had a little bit of Pickens County over here, the Saluda Lake area, and then also the Greenville side of Piedmont. And so I've been representing the State House District 10 for the last 7 years. I consider it a great honor to be a voice of so many people, of my constituents, in the decisions that are made every day in Columbia. The reason why I got into office was to be a voice for people that I didn't believe had a voice in their government. I'm the oldest of 8 siblings, so I come from a very large family. My dad's always worked 2 to 3 jobs my entire life. I didn't believe that my dad had his voice represented in government. I believe too often we forget the people that work very hard in and day out to provide for their families. And I don't think government responds to their needs. I don't think they understand when we pass a tax increase or regulation increase, how much it affects people that live paycheck to paycheck. Because, yeah, it might be a $50 increase on a fee. Well, that $50 really hurts small middle-class families across our state. So I've been honored to serve in the House. I've been honored to have a conservative record of fighting for limited government principles. And that brings me to, why are you running for Secretary of State? And a lot of people ask me that. Why would you give up the opportunity to be a House member, to have a vote on every issue, to run for Secretary of State, an office that has been overlooked for the last 16 years? And it's an office that is viewed as a paper-pushing office. That's all people think. And from a political standpoint, it's an office you go to just to kind of retire at. You don't move on. That's about the end of your political career when you run for Secretary of State. And so I have a lot of people that ask me, well, you're so young. Why would you run for Secretary of State, go to an office that's pretty much the end part of your political service? And I answered back, I said, when I first ran for office, it wasn't ever about Joshua Putnam. It's about being a voice. It's about being a voice for conservative Republican principles. The principles that I grew up and my family always taught me. And so when I decided to run for Secretary of State over about a year ago, and we were researching it for about 2 years before that, but we made our official announcement about a year ago, is because I saw an office that was underutilized, an office that did not live up to what its full potential could be. And that's what I want to talk to you tonight about. I want to talk to you about my vision for the office of Secretary of State. It's not the vision that it's been over the last 16 years. Whatever you know about the Secretary of State's office over the last 16 years is not what I would do as the next Secretary of State. So obviously, it deals with business registration, it deals with notaries of the public. It's the record keeper of all state government. I believe we can do those functions and do it a lot more efficiently with better technology, save the taxpayer money. I think that's the number one goal as a legislator, is we got to understand whatever it costs us to do a function in government, we got to understand it's someone else's money and it's not our money. So how do we be good stewards of that money? Well, I think you look for every cost-effective way, and I've looked at the budget in the Secretary of State's office, and I've looked through it for the last 6 years. And not just the House budget that the House passes. Because if you look at the House budget, it's just one line item. I've looked into the detail. I know where they're paying for dry cleaning and all that kind of stuff. And what we've identified about $200,000 of funds that we could use for better things. And what we would do, and I think this is important to understand, I can promise you everything. As a politician, I can say, I'm going to give you free this, I'm going to give you free this, I'm going to give you free that. Well, that's not how it happens, because the legislator is very important with anything that happens in the Office of Secretary of State. If I want to figure out how to reduce fees, well, I have to go to the legislator. I have to work with them. They have to give me the authority to do that. The Secretary of State does not have the authority by himself to grant free business licenses. So our goal is to take the $200 of savings that we don't believe is used wisely for the taxpayers, and we're going to ask the legislator if we could repurpose those funds for technology upgrades. And what I believe in technology upgrades is making it work faster, making it work better. I think the biggest proponent, that is my second point, is small business advocate. What we're going to do is we're going to focus on a one-stop portal within already state government. We're not going to build a new website, okay? When we build a new website, it just costs more money. We're going to figure out how to incorporate that within our current infrastructure. But you don't need to travel across the state going to municipality after municipality to figure out how to do a business. You should be able to go to a website, put in the type of business, the area you're doing business in, and it gives you every form right there where you can do it all in 30 minutes. What does that do? Well, it saves municipalities millions of dollars. Do you know they have staff that just hands you paper forms? Well, we can keep paper forms in all the municipalities, but for a business owner, it would save them time, but it's also going to save so much on the man hours within the local municipalities. So we'll save the state overall millions of dollars for technology upgrades of how we're going to centralize all this. But the real big part about small business advocate is I believe in the last 7 years, we do a good job of the Boeings, Michelins, BMWs, all those mega corporations. We do a good job of taking care of the needs that are important to them. And I'm not saying anything bad about those mega corporations. I'm not a Bernie Sanders, hate the rich, all that kind of stuff. I'm glad they're here in South Carolina. They bring a lot of good, well-paying jobs. But we also got to understand, when we shift the tax burden off from the mega corporations, we also shift that to the back of the small business owners. Act 388 was, I think, one of the worst things that we did in the state. From a few different aspects. It had some really good things, but also it had some negative things where we moved a lot of tax burden on back of small business owners. So I think what we need to do, instead of just giving a voice to big corporations in the state, we've got to be a voice for small business owners that have to deal with health care costs every day, that has to deal with regulation every day that we pass in Columbia. They don't have a seat at the table, and that's what we want to do as the next Secretary of State, is be a voice for them within their government. And then our final point is election reform. Now, why is election reform important? Well, right now, your election commissions are run by unelected bureaucrats. Now, most counties have their county board of elections, and they run very well. There's a couple areas in the state where they don't run well because they're run by Democrats. And those areas that are run by Democrats, they suppress the vote in Republican voting areas. If you look around Columbia, they'll send broken machines, less machines in the Republican voting precincts. I don't believe that's right. But I don't believe that you as a voter, you should have somebody to be held accountable every single election. When you go to vote, you need somebody that you can hold accountable for the way our elections are run. And I think bringing accountability within the election system underneath the Secretary of State, I think it makes sense. It's what's done in the majority of every other state. But once we articulate that and push for that type of reform, our biggest thing is closed primaries and term limits. I believe if the governor is term limited to 2 consecutive 4-year terms, then why isn't every other statewide office term limited to 2 4-year consecutive terms? You can take off after those 8 years, take off 4 years, then run again. That's fine. But I believe in a constitutional office, it's much different than a House and a Senate office. Because a constitutional office, you're mainly the only eyeballs that look at that office and everything that goes on there. And so I believe it's good to have turnover in those types of offices, to keep it accountable, to keep it working for the people, to keep that office grounded in the vision of serving the people and not becoming about serving themselves. So we're going to push for term limits for constitutional office holders, and I'm pledging, as a politician, I'm not going to say, well, I'm for term limits and never term limit myself. I'm only asking for 2 terms, and that's it. I will never be your Secretary of State more than 2 terms, because it's not about me, and running for this office is not about me. After those 2 terms, I'll do something else. I'll go back to the private sector. I'll run my small business and everything, or do something else. I'm not sure. We'll see what the Lord has in store for me if I'm given this opportunity to be your next Secretary of State. But the reason why I'm running for the office is not to stay in there for the next 16 years. It's to go make a difference, show what good government can be in South Carolina. And then, obviously, closed party primaries. I believe Republicans should be voting for Republicans. I don't believe you need crossover voters. We are a private organization as a Republican Party. So is the Democrat Party. They should have their people picking them. Libertarians, they should have their people picking libertarians. You don't need crossover voters. And I think closed party primaries is something the Republican Party has been pushing for years and years and years, but we can't get it through. And that's something that we want to push. But let me tell you the most important role of the Secretary of State. Obviously, we're going to run on these 3 points, but the most important is to be your voice in state government. You see, the Secretary of State is the second most important office that's overlooked in South Carolina. So we all understand what the governor does and the ability the governor has. The two biggest functions the governor has is his veto, okay? We all understand how that works. It's a very good tool that the governor has. The other big tool the governor has is the bully pulpit. He can speak on any issue, he can travel the state, he can speak at any group, and he can go after the legislator. When the legislator is not doing conservative Republican things, he can go after that person. We saw that a lot with Nikki Haley. She traveled the state. I was a House member and everything. I remember legislators did not like that at all when she traveled the state because she beat up on us when we weren't doing conservative Republican things. The Secretary of State is the only statewide office that touches every aspect of state government. When you touch everything that goes on in South Carolina, it gives you an opportunity to speak on everything that happens in the legislature. And what I would use the office for is to draft and make policy. And what would that mean? What would drafting and making policy as the Secretary of State? Well, let's say it's education reform. Well, we've got to move our education system into the 21st century. We can no longer rely on educating kids back into how we did it in the 40s and 60s. It's not how it's going to work in today's world. So education is very important to the workforce. We're getting all these companies moved here, bringing all these jobs. Every time, as a legislator, whenever a company says, we got a job announcement of 500 jobs, it gives me a pit in my stomach because I realize we don't have the workforce to supply those jobs. And we've got to be proactive. We've got to think 5, 10, 15 years down the road. And we've got to transform our education system to adapt and to be able to respond to our job needs in South Carolina. And so as a Secretary of State, when you deal with a business, that allows me as a Secretary of State to push conservative educational reforms. It allows me to go to our great senator here in Pickens and say, hey, here's the deal. We're on the same mindset. We agree on this. Let me be your mouthpiece outside this chamber in Columbia. Because as a House member or a Senate member, you have the ability to speak in your district with authority and get people's attention. But if I want to travel down to Myrtle Beach as a House member, I don't really have the same microphone. I don't have the same platform as I do in my district. The Secretary of State, no matter where he goes, he's always able to speak about any issue. He's able to speak at any Republican event, any Chamber of Commerce event, or anything like that. And that's what's powerful that we got to understand, is the ability that the Secretary of State can help push conservative reforms through the legislature. Because I've been there for 7 years, and there's it's hard to get bills through, and the senator knows that. And we need more voices talking. I don't think we need fewer in government, especially right now. Everybody's looking at the Republican Party. We have the White House, we have the U.S. Congress, we have the state capitol, all underneath the Republican leadership. Every Democrat is looking at every single thing we do. We have got to communicate every day what it means to be a conservative Republican in South Carolina. We've got to lead by example, because if we fail now, we might not give another opportunity for years and years to come. And then we can't wait. My kids can't wait. We can't squander the opportunity we've been given as a Republican Party. So I believe we have got to, in every issue, give a clear vision of what it means to be conservative Republicans. And that's the reason why we're running for Secretary of State. It's about what the office can be. It's not about what the office has been. It's about a vision for the office that can use to be your voice in every aspect of government. And that's what I want to transform it to be, is to be your voice and to work with good legislators to get good bills passed. I know, I've been in a House and we have some really good legislators and all that, but sometimes our voices are muted. And I think by having an outside voice to help partner with those legislators, and also in the Senate and everything, just to help bring more conversation to that so we don't get bogged down and it get lost in all the other Columbia noise. So that's the reason why I'm running for Secretary of State. I'd love to answer any questions about the Secretary of State or our position or our platform. So, right there.
What changes in the curriculum would you advocate for?
Okay. You need a microphone?
Well, then the folks at home won't
Yeah.
hear your question.
Yeah.
Seriously, please don't get it on the table unless you talk.
Oh, what changes in curriculum would you advocate for?
Well, okay, so the education was an example of how the Secretary of State could talk about education issues. I think the most important is identifying how kids learn. See, I grew up with dyslexia, okay? I was very ADHD, okay? Sitting in a desk, Joshua Putnam did not learn well sitting in a desk. Joshua Putnam learned very well walking around, using his hands, getting his hands on things. if we look at the business community right now, they're not sitting in cubicles anymore. Now, some are, but some of the more creative companies, they're having all their workers in these rooms where they're writing stuff on whiteboards and doing very creative activities. That's where our business community is headed, is into an innovative sector. We've got to be able to adapt those same techniques within our public school system to get kids to learn. I mean, kids are using technology now more than they ever have, tablets and all that kind of stuff. So we got to get them trained on that kind of stuff and be able to work the jobs in the 21st century. So I think it's more about how we get kids to learn more than it's about, obviously the curriculum is very important. I think obviously the biggest thing we need to do is we need to teach history and true history. I don't think we do a good job of that. You can't move forward as a civilization if you don't understand your past and what you've gone through. Then obviously writing, reading, all those kind of skills, math, science, they're all very important. But I think also we got to understand is how we deliver that information to the child. How do we give the child all the tools that he or she needs to excel within their education? And we got to understand that every child does not learn the same way. We treat every child as if they learn the same way. I don't understand that. I didn't learn the same way as my brothers and sisters learned. My kids, they're not going to learn the same way as each other. We got to understand that in the public school system. That we have a lot of kids from a lot of different backgrounds, from a lot of different beliefs. We got to understand that we've got to be creative in how we educate our kids. But a good question.
I've got one.
Yeah.
Do you have a strategy for getting to registration by party? Do you get a map in your head of the best way to move forward on it?
Yeah. I think I think we have some good representatives who agree with registration by party in the House and in the Senate. I think what you do as a Secretary of State is you work with them. You get a bill drafted, you get a bill dropped. And then my job as Secretary of State, I can't vote on that any longer, okay? Because I don't have that ability. But what I do have is I have my voice, and I have a car, and I can drive in the entire state of South Carolina. I can speak at every single event, and whenever that bill doesn't get passed and everything through the legislature, I can take it to each member's district and say, why aren't we doing this? We need registration by party. We need to know who our mental carrier is. We need to make sure that those people are true Republicans. We need to make sure that they hold our values. We need authentic representation as we move forward. And I think what you do as Secretary of State is you take that message to every corner of the state. And I think that's where the office has never been utilized in, is being the mouthpiece for those types of reforms.
Well, if I understand you right,
Yeah.
you would, sounds like you, and I like the idea, I don't mean
Yeah.
to sound derogatory.
Yeah.
You would be you're going to be lobbying for us.
Yes.
Instead of a lobbyist. Do you see the Secretary of State job as being
Yeah.
a lobbyist for the people?
I see the Secretary of State job as the most important lobbyist for the people of South Carolina. And that's what I view the office as. Running the basic functions of the office is not difficult. I'm not going to make it sound like it's difficult. I could take a college intern. No offense to college interns out there. But I could take a college intern and run the office the way it's being run. And so as we use more technology, we get more functions, we get better results from newer technology. We get the office running a lot better. And then that's where we become the advocate for all of state government. Because I think we need more voices as constituents within our government. I don't think it's bad to have more voices. I think, and here's the big thing, I believe if I take a taxpayer salary, okay, I have the ability to speak, and I have the duty to speak on any issue that affects a taxpayer. Because the taxpayer pays my salary, I believe if they do that, you have got to articulate and you've got to go fight for them every day because they're your boss. Yeah.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay.
Anybody else got a question?
Any other questions?
David, you were talking about the change in the way you get permits to make it more uniform a while ago. You want to?
I'm a contractor also,
Yeah.
and we spend a lot of time chasing permits
Yeah.
and license through all these little municipals.
Yeah.
Share with us your idea on making that process a little simpler.
Okay, so what I would do is I would work and I would go meet with every municipality in the state of South Carolina. And I'm going to say this. I want to save you money, okay? So that's going to get them on board. Okay, wait, how are you going to save us money, Joshua, as the next Secretary of State? Then what I would do is I would say all your forms, all your permits, okay? What we're going to do is we're going to house all those forms within our website, okay? So you give me whatever form, you give me whatever regulation you want for your municipality, And instead of having somebody come down to your office, we're going to capture all of that on a website. And then I'm going to send you all the money straight to your coffers, okay? And I know the municipalities don't like the legislator. I get that. There's a lot of local government fund issues, and I understand there's some bad blood there. But what we have to do is we make a pass-through where the legislators can't get their hands on it, okay? Because I think from municipality, if you're going to try to get that reform, you got to understand both sides, okay? So the municipality side is, well, if the economy goes down and our main revenue generation is from these fees, from these permits, well, if the legislator is touching these fees, what if they grab it? Now, I understand we're in a good year, but they think from a perspective, okay, what happens if the shoe falls? So what we've got to do is we've got to work out a plan where we make sure it's a pass-through, and we give them the guarantees, we give them the safeguards, where we understand that their revenue will not be touched by anybody else besides themselves. And then at that point, they're like, okay, good. I like that. That checks my first box. Okay, wait, you're going to save my manpower resources in the municipality? Okay, that checks another box and everything. I can still control my local processes and my local regulations. That's a great box. Then what we've done now is we've worked with them. Now we go to the legislator and we say, here we go. We're going to save the individual business owners a lot of money in South Carolina because we're going to make it all easy. And then what we do is we work with the legislators to get the bill passed, get it crafted, get it into law. And then with that $200,000 that I saw within the budget, we're going to go to the legislator and say, hey, here's the deal. We need this platform on our website. I find you the $200,000 to pay for that, okay? And then we go to the legislator and we'll say, here's the money that we can pay for that. The legislators, hopefully, at that point, we're like, okay, you're not costing us any more money. You're saving us money, and you're saving municipalities money, and just making it business-friendly in a state. That's how we get that happen. And then at this point, this is what's beautiful for every South Carolinian. You go to the website, you put in the type of business, you put in your zip code where you're going to do business. Every form pops down in real time. You can take out your credit card, you can fill it all out there. It submits it in real time, and it keeps it in a folder for you where you can access it. And also, here's the great thing. You can print off all your legal documents. We're not going to charge you for that because you've already paid for it once. We don't need to charge you again, another fee. And then there you go. So you can sit at your desk. You can literally get every permit that you need for any municipality within that area. Now, obviously, there's going to be a couple permits that you're going to have somebody come out there. Like if it's an electrical permit, they'll have to come send an inspector out there. But you can do all the process up there, and it keys all that stuff in real time. I think that's how we think outside the box. Number one, that saves taxpayer funds. It makes South Carolina business friendly. Because the biggest thing when I talk to contractors and business owners is not obviously the fees are killer too. But their biggest issue is the time it takes, the travel to figure out, what do I need here? What do I need here? Oh, I didn't get this paper. I got to drive back and everything. It's very time consuming. If they had all that in one location, I think it saves them.
I think the big issue is that when you're doing business in the upstate,
Yeah.
and you're working in these municipals, they're not linked into a website where you can sign up and do it online, so
Yeah.
you're forced to go 20 miles through
Yep.
traffic,
Exactly.
sign a document, write a check, come
Yep.
back, fill the report
Yep.
out, go back. So it is a little
so-
frustrating. So if it's under one banner, I think most contractors would like that. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily about the money, though, because we pass that on to the consumer.
yeah.
But it is a time
Time.
problem in the office, especially if you've got to send manpower to a municipal
Exactly.
to do that.
Yep.
That is very costly.
And I think that's what we do. Obviously, we let the municipalities keep paper copies. Okay, if somebody wants to walk into a brick and mortar store, then yeah, they have the paper copies. They can fill it out, give it to the person. But what we do is we can cut down those paper copies about 98%. And what we do is we don't need each municipality putting it on their website. We centralize all that in one portal. I think that's how we save municipalities. We could save municipalities millions of dollars each year by simplifying how they do. And we still leave them in control. They can control all those processes. What they'll do is say, okay, Josh, this year we're going to require this, this, and this. Put it on the website. Okay, we got it checked. Ready to go. That's how we save. That's how we got to get them to that portion. Because right now, it's very, I'm a small business owner. It's very difficult to figure out what you have to get here, what you have to get here. Well, this is different in this municipality. This municipality doesn't have that type of license that you need. So having all that in one area, even linking the federal government stuff with the IRS and then also the State Department of Revenue, getting all that within one system, that's how you use technology to save taxpayer funds. We don't need 10 different websites to go to. You just need one portal to get it all.
Following up on
Yeah.
that, I've believed for a long time that we got a there's too many licenses required in this state to
Yeah.
do business.
Yeah.
I've used this example many times. My grandfather cut hair at the Powdersville store, the old Powdersville
Yeah.
store there at the forks of the road, during the Depression to make extra money. He cut hair on Saturday morning. He couldn't do that now. He'd have to go get a barber's license to do it. I mean, I get the joke is, what is the state trying to protect us from? A bad haircut? I mean,
Yeah.
the truth of the matter is the Barbers Association lobbied the state legislature to restrict who could cut hair so they could cut back on competition.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's my opinion.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't point to a place where I can, swear to it on the Bible that's the truth, but that's my
Yeah.
humble opinion. But I said all that to say this, to ask you this. Do we need a review of these permits and licenses and stuff to figure out what's necessary and what's just a lobbyist dream and
Yeah.
what's best for the people in a free market?
Yeah. Well, I mean, obviously, I think we need to review regulation every day. And the senator will say, I mean, we've had bills in the House and the Senate that would roll off regulation and all that. And I think we need to understand how regulation affects small business owners. And so, yeah, I mean, you're right. Obviously, in a perfect world, it'd be you have one license and you operate anywhere in the state. That would be the perfect world. Our goal with our initiative, with what I was talking about, is building a stepping stone progress, getting this working well, and then moving to the next where we can keep reforming. I think we always have to reform. We always have to keep thinking outside the box. We can't ever be, oh, well, we fixed the problem. Now we don't ever address it ever again. We have to always figure out how we save taxpayer funds in everything we do.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
One more thing I want to ask you. I'm a candidate for District 5, and one of the things that I want to work on is helping small businesses, because we're always picked on because the same requirements for Walmart are required by a business that does $10,000 a year.
Yeah.
DHEC, city licensing, all the permits and requirements that every company is required to perform on are the same standards for all of us. I think sometimes there needs to be a little less regulation for small businesses and getting a pass on some of the red tape and problems that small businesses are facing, because I think it deeply impedes businesses from becoming and being what they need to be because of the requirements by the government and the state to perform on these tasks.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
No, I agree. I mean, I think you need to, obviously, what you do with Walmart, if you're a mom and pop that only make a fraction of what Walmart makes and everything out of that one store, obviously, Walmart can absorb those massive fees. The mom and pops can't. Now, regulation from the standpoint of we don't want our water to be catching on fire, those regulations are good, okay? So, but we got to also understand that a lot of regulation that we pass really affects small business owners in a very dramatic way. I mean, I own an industrial cleaning company in the upstate. I mean, it's my cost. If I was competing with mega corporations, they can absorb a lot of costs. I got to eat that cost.
Right.
And so, yeah, it's not fair. And I understand that. I mean, the same. So I think we need to work with local governments, figure out how to simplify how we treat people on a scale based on how large they are, what kind of revenues they bring in compared to, obviously, Walmart. I mean, it's different. It's two different animals. But when we charge, and I'm not saying we need to charge bigger corporations more. We just need to make it fair. And I think that's what we've got to look at is we make it a fair, equal playing field. And we've got to understand as legislators, whenever we pass something, it dramatically affects small business owners in a lot larger and a larger scale than it does bigger corporations. And I think that's the biggest thing we've got to understand when we pass bills is, okay, how does this affect the small guys, the mom and pop, the 4 employees, the 5 employee businesses? How does it really affect them? So, yeah, good question.
Back to education.
Okay.
Where do you see the vocational schools in our high school system?
Yeah.
Where do you see those vocational schools fitting into it, and what kind of reforms or changes you think need to be made there?
Yeah. Well, I think we need more career and technology centers incorporated in every school. We also need to see. I used to work in higher education. I used to work as a career counselor. Okay, so I dealt with college students who were trying to figure out how to go get jobs and all that, and most times they were changing their majors multiple times. Well, when you get to college, you shouldn't really be changing your major. Okay, you should know kind of where you want to go into. The best way to figure that out is to get them in high school, middle school, understanding what is their God-given traits. What are they good at? What sparks their interest? We should be sparking that interest within middle school, within elementary school, within high school. I think career services is great. I don't think everybody needs a 4-year degree. There's a lot of jobs out there in South Carolina that you do not need a 4-year university degree. You can get a certificate program. You can go to a technical college. I think those are really important because right now BMW, Michelin's, Boeing's, they need good skilled workers, and they're paying out the wall for those type of workers. And we need to get those kids involved. I think using career and technology centers, partnering with every technical college in the state to get them in every high school in the state, getting these kids understanding what their gifts are, and getting them on that path in high school before they get to college. Yeah.
See what you think of this as a reform. If you think it's
Okay.
if it's worth talking about or worth considering. I had a great gym teacher when I was in high school at Wren, Coach Muth. And he was great in the sense that he threw every sport in the world at you that he could think of. Anything from horseshoes and archery to flag football, anything you could think of. Theory being, if you offer the kids enough variety, they'll find something where they fit, something they're good at, something that fits their hand.
Yeah.
You can't offer everything in the world in the vocational school, but my reform would be, rather than trying to focus on one or two things, to offer as many things as possible, to give the kids a chance to try their hand at different things, to see what fits their hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
No, I think that's great. I think encouraging like apprenticeships and stuff like that in like middle school, getting kids involved in different jobs and all that. I think the biggest thing is get them exposed to a lot of different things so then they can figure out, oh, well, this is what I want to go into. I'm really good at this. I'm gifted at this and everything. I think getting that early and getting those kids into that, it saves on, I mean, whenever you change your major in college, you're just adding more debt on at that point.
I brought it up because that was sort of the approach when I was in high school in shop class, and it seems like they've gotten away from that.
Yeah. No, I like that. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I got one.
Yeah.
I used to have a landline
Okay.
at my house,
Yeah.
and I used to get phone calls all the time,
Yeah.
trying to scam me out of my credit card number,
Yep.
trying to sell you this. So I had my landline taken out.
Exactly.
So they changed over.
Yep.
Now they're calling you on your cell phone,
Yep.
and it's constant. You know, a lot of times I don't even answer if
Yeah.
I don't recognize
Yeah.
the number. What role was your role as Secretary of the State? What could you do about that?
So a big thing is we monitor nonprofits and charities. A big issue that we've identified that we're going to talk about a lot on this campaign is not just what we do right now is we find a bad charity, they don't turn in their form, so we suspend them, okay? But we don't realize is when we suspend them, they're still out there operating a majority of the time, okay? But we're not following up. We're not talking to law enforcement. What I would do as the Secretary of State, when we suspend a nonprofit or a charity, the first thing I'm doing is I'm contacting the Attorney General. I'm sending a letter saying this organization's been suspended because they're in violation of whatever policy. They didn't turn in their financial documents or something else that we found out. So we're going to send it to Attorney General. Second thing we're going to send it to local law enforcement. Why do you send it to local law enforcement? Because they're driving around that community every single day. And if I'm going to tell them in the letter, if you see anybody going in and out of that establishment, they're not supposed to be operating. You let me know. The third letter we send it to the Department of Revenue, okay? Because when you're a nonprofit, you get tax breaks, okay? So if we suspend your nonprofit, but we don't tell the Department of Revenue that we've suspended you, guess what? They're not collecting tax revenue. Because when you're not a nonprofit, all those tax revenues go up through the roof, okay? All the taxable revenues, okay? But we aren't telling our left or right hand what's going on. And we're allowing these nonprofits, and we got a lot of documentation that we're going to release in the next couple of months that's going to prove exactly what we're saying, that we're not talking to our left and our right hand. And what we're allowing these nonprofits to stay in suspension for years, but no prosecution of that, and they're still operating as if they were a legit nonprofit, and they're scamming our citizens every single day. And we have a lot of documentation to prove exactly that, because we're not telling people. When we suspend a nonprofit, We're not telling local law enforcement. We're not telling the AG to go prosecute them, and we're definitely not telling the Department of Revenue that they've lost their nonprofit status. Because what the Department of Revenue needs to do, the next day, they need to send them a tax bill because they're not a nonprofit, and they don't need to act like a nonprofit. So that's what we would do with nonprofits and charities. You're talking more about telemarketers and all that. I know Rick Martin in the House and myself, we both introduced the bill this year. I'm not sure if y'all have seen it, where people will spoof your numbers, and spoofing is they'll take like your number, your cell phone number, and they'll call you on that number. And so we've got to go after those corporations, those businesses that do that. So they make, I mean, even I'll get phone calls and it looks exactly like my number or my wife's number calling me. And so usually when it's familiar, you pick up that phone and it's a telemarketer trying to scam you for something. We need to be very aggressive how we put teeth in the bill to go after those kind of companies that prey upon our people. One of my ideas in the bill is you're not allowed to use the South Carolina area code unless you have a brick and mortar store in South Carolina. So no longer, I mean, if you're AT&T or whatever, if you're calling with a South Carolina area code, you got to have a brick and mortar store in South Carolina in that area code zone. I think that will help clamp down on some of that spoofing, but some of it's going to be hard to prosecute because some of them's coming in from India and other places. But I think if we get aggressive, I know Rick Martin has a bill. I introduced a bill to kind of go after that kind of stuff that you're talking about with phone calls and all that, because they've shifted. They've shifted from landlines to now your cell phone. You're exactly right. But we've got to make sure that we protect our citizens from being victims of these predatory practices. And so I think by using legislation to kind of go after that, we can kind of help clamp that down, and then it's just got to be enforcement.
Along that
Yeah.
that line, I called in. They had an 800 number to have you supposedly
Yeah.
have you taken off of that thing for a
Okay.
year. That lasts for about a month.
Yeah, yeah,
And they
Yeah.
start calling again, so I've just
Yeah.
quit calling that number. But it's
Yeah.
it's
it's
something that needs to be taken care
yeah,
of.
yeah. I mean, I get probably 3 calls every day that are not legitimate calls, that are just trying to get me to sign up for something. I don't know, we stayed at a Holiday Inn last year, my family, and I'm not sure if they sold my data to somebody, but I get calls about, you've won this sweepstake, and you got 12 days at this 5-star resort. And I was like, I just paid $100 for one room one night. How did I get $1,200 free now? That doesn't make any sense, but I agree. I appreciate that question.
Do you have
Yeah.
anything to do with the regulations regarding public housing?
In the Secretary of State's office, no, you wouldn't deal with that. Okay, any other questions? I know it's getting late. And
I got one more you can close.
Okay.
on. My pet peeve.
there you go.
My pet peeve is no separation of power in state government. You work in it.
Yeah.
You know it better than I do, and you're talking about hitting all the subjects all the topics that affect the citizens of South Carolina and lobbying for change and reform. The idea that all power in this state is vested in the legislature, and the executive branch and the judiciary branch is pretty much under the control of the legislature.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't have to explain it to you. You know. You think we could ever reform this thing and get it to where we've got an actual separation of powers between the 3 branches of government in our state?
I think we can, and I think it's going to take time, and it's going to take activists like you talking about it. It's going to take a Secretary of State talking about these issues every single day. I think as long as we keep talking, keep hitting, I mean, I know it's frustrating and all that, but we got to keep on and everything. That's how we're going to see change happen. But I agree. I mean, it's like DOT. I want DOT to be run by the governor, or I've put in bills to allow you to elect the commissioner of DOT. So no more legislators picking commissioners or anything like that. I would actually, your ballot box, I allow you to pick. Have y'all been following the public service commissioners and all that kind of stuff?
Somewhat.
Y'all been following all the failed VC summer and all that? Well, I dropped a bill that your public service commissioner, okay, would be elected by a congressional district. So every 4 years or something like that, their term, you'd go to the ballot box. You would vote for your public service commissioner. That public service commissioner would be accountable to you. They would work for you every day to make sure your utility rates stay in check. Georgia does something very similar to that. I think it's something that we need in South Carolina. I think giving more power to the people to have more representation in our government, trying to break, and I understand we have a very strong legislative branch. there's a lot of reasons why we developed that years and years ago, because we moved away from a kingship. We didn't want a kingship, and then there's a lot of that happened back during segregation and all that, and I understand all that. There's a lot of history of how we got to the part that we are, but we also got to understand now we're one of the few states that still have that type of system in place. And obviously we're seeing it. We're seeing it from road funding. We're seeing it from all that, where the citizens of our state are suffering from that, where you don't have a direct line of accountability for those important positions. Yep, thank y'all.
And I have to say, you're very good on your feet.
Well, thank you.
You do.
I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
And let me say, the senator over here, I mean, I'm not sure how blessed y'all are to know who you have, but he fights every day for conservative principles in the Senate. And it's in the House, I got some good Padres and all that I run with. In the Senate, I don't know how many you got over there, but I appreciate your leadership in the Senate. He does a great job of being your voice in the Senate. So, I mean, I can't say enough good things about you. And so, yeah. Yeah. And he picks up trash. I've never seen a state senator ever pick up trash. Like, I see you pick up trash more than anybody. So,
Rex, you want the mic? You done? Okay. That's all right. Beth.
Yes. Ask you. I'm on the City of Clemson Planning Commission, not because I'm a planner, but because I'm a citizen and I want to protect property rights. Just to get that off the table. But I come under the Freedom of Information Act, and I tell people by phone and by text, I'm under the Freedom of Information Act. The legislators are not.
Yeah.
I don't understand that. Yeah. Also, I'm also under the South Carolina Ethics Commission and a citizen of Clemson, the city. We're separate from, just so you know, the university is a different municipality. Cannot buy me a sandwich. Is unethical. Yeah. And so, but I see, like, I was in Columbia one day when the beef industry was there, and I love the beef industry. There's nothing wrong with it, but they were feeding all the state house, and I just think there's a problem there.
Well, I agree. So for your first point regarding, there we go. Freedom of Information Act. So I do not believe legislators should have an exemption to not be FOIA'd, okay? I do understand if there's a constituent calling me with a problem, like they give me personal information or they give me their personal Social Security number so I can go give it to another agency. I don't believe that personal sensitive information should be FOIA'd. I think that should be protected. They give that to, obviously, as a constituent, you give that information to an elected official. You don't think it should be on the newspaper, okay? I agree with protecting that. I don't agree with protecting everything. And we have a blanket protection over everything that we do. I think it should all be FOIA'd except for very limited when it deals with constituents' interactions with sensitive information. That should not be public. So that's my first thing. So I think you protect that one thing where obviously I don't want my constituents' private information getting out there. I don't think, as a citizen, you shouldn't feel like your information should get out there. Like, if you give me a Social Security number, that should not be FOIA'd. But no, I think you draft the legislation that would protect those kind of transmissions. But everything else, if you want to see my calendar, if you want to see who's inviting me to stuff, and some of that you can FOIA. But all, like, if I'm talking, let's say a lobbyist emails me, okay? Well, I think you should be able to see that, okay? That email, if somebody sends me, okay, here's some information, Josh, about this bill coming up. Well, you should be able to see that. You should understand who's talking to your legislators. So I totally agree with that. For your situations about somebody not buying, I think it's a coffee cup rule where nobody can buy you more than like a $2 coffee cup drink or something like that.
I'm not worried about it. I'm just saying in contrast.
Yeah, in contrast, I think we need obviously, if you see what's going on with our ethics, there's a lot of ethics issues in South Carolina. There's no question about that. I think we need real-time reporting. I want to know exactly. I've talked to people. I said, with your campaign finances, I want my bank app right here. I can pull up my bank app. I can see every deposit, every transaction real time. I think you as a constituent should see what your elected officials are spending money in real time, who's giving to them in real time, kind of thing. I think that's a good way of helping out our ethics. There's a lot of other ethics issues that we need to address. I know one of our House members brought it up the other day, but former House members can be lobbyists and they can still keep their campaign accounts open. That doesn't make much sense. So there's a lot that we need to clean up, and we got to be really aggressive. Because the rules that we play by, the rules that you play by every single day as constituents should be the same rules that govern us. So, but thank you for that question.
And one more time, let's give Josh a hand. Having done what he just did, stand up in front of a bunch of people and just take questions and you don't know where they're going to come from, takes a certain amount of courage. And the young man is, you're good on your feet. So thank you for coming. I enjoyed it. Thank you all for coming. Unless you have some other questions you want to ask Rex, or I guess we're done. Have a good evening.